I'm now pleased to introduce our commencement speaker, Dr. Vivek Murthy. Dr. Murthy's commitment to medicine and health began early in life. The son of immigrants from India, he discovered the art of healing in his father's medical clinic in Miami, Florida. A believer in the power of community, he and his sister co-founded Visions, a peer-to-peer HIV/AIDS education program in India, and Swasthya, health and well-being in Sanskrit, a community health partnership that trained women to defy the odds in their patriarchal villages and become healthcare providers and educators. As a healthcare entrepreneur, Dr. Murthy co-founded Trial Networks, a technology company that improves research collaboration in clinical trials around the world. He also co-founded Doctors for America, a nonprofit organization with more than 16,000 physician and medical student members from all 50 states, dedicating to creating a high-quality, affordable healthcare system, a mission still underway. Dr. Murthy received his bachelor's degree from Harvard and his MD and MBA degrees from Yale. He resides in Washington, D.C. with his wife and young son. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Vivek Murthy.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Lassner, for that very kind introduction. To all the faculty and staff who are here today, to the proud family and friends who have made today possible, to the Board of Regents, to the staff of this university, and most importantly, to the graduates of the class of 2017. Aloha. It is certainly an honor to be with you as you celebrate this incredible milestone. Now, whether you are the first to graduate from college in your family, or the next in a long lineage of doctors and engineers, I know how much pride you have each brought to your families today. Over the last several years, you have been on a journey together. You have spent thousands of hours studying, at least most of you. You have celebrated success together. You have hung out at the Warrior Rec Center together. You have helped each other through disappointments and heartbreaks. And you have shared meals, thrown parties, and also, as I understand it, consumed dangerously high doses of caffeinated beverages at places like the Campus Center or Manoa Gardens. But you have also done extraordinary things for your community. You have tutored kids in after-school programs. You have volunteered in hospitals to care for those who are ill. And you have invested in studying hula and other elements of Native Hawaiian culture, recognizing that we must preserve and strengthen our prized heritage here in Hawaii. Now, like many of you, my journey to this stage was a pretty unlikely one. If life was governed by probability, I would be growing rice, tamarind, and coconuts in a small village in South India. I would be just barely scraping together the resources that I needed to feed my family and to clothe them. Because that was a life that my grandfather led, and that was a life that my father was destined to lead. But the funny thing about dreams is that they take root in unlikely places. And my father, in the midst of bracing poverty, found himself dreaming of a brighter future, full of opportunity, in a faraway land. He found himself dreaming of America. Nearly 40 years ago, my parents managed to come to America with little money and with few connections, but with high hopes for the life that they could build for themselves and for my sister and me. They inspired me to become a doctor through their own care for patients. And they raised my sister and me to believe that America was a place where our ideas and our willingness to work hard mattered more than the color of our skin or the sound of our accent or how funny sounding our names might be. And I tell you that despite all of our imperfections as a nation, that I am fully aware that in no other country in the world could the grandson of a poor farmer from India be asked by the president to look out for the health of an entire nation? That is the power and promise of America. As all of you step into this new world with your degrees, you may be wondering, what kind of world am I inheriting? Now, if you consume a lot of media, which I would advise against because it could be hazardous to your health, but if you do, you likely feel a pervasive sense of unease, uncertainty, and anxiety. And while the challenges we face are real, I also want you to know how much possibility and hope the world holds for you. Each day I traveled our country as Surgeon General, I saw reasons to be optimistic about America in the faces and stories of the people I met in small towns and big cities. The community members in Flint, Michigan, who organized volunteers to go door to door to educate neighbors about how to drink safe water, even though their families were under threat. The Native American children who ran the I Am Indian program in Oklahoma so they could strengthen Indian culture among their peers to prevent experimentation with alcohol and drugs. The doctors I met in Virginia who began planting gardens behind their clinic so they could provide free food for patients who didn't have enough to eat. And the parents who I met all across America who have lost a child to drug overdoses, but who were transforming their pain into education and advocacy so that other parents could be spared their unspeakable tragedies. There is a lot of good to be found in the world if we are willing to look for it. But there are real challenges too. We are struggling with an epidemic of chronic illness in our country, like substance use and addiction. We face new threats to our national security from disease as well as from individuals who would seek to do us harm. But perhaps most alarming to me is that there is a deep sense of division in our country that is fueled by fear. Fear of change and fear of the unknown that too often translates into a fear of people who are different from us. Fear that leads us to lose sight of our core values of equality, opportunity, and respect for all. Fear that leads us to retreat into our corners instead of standing together to take on tough problems, like the opioid crisis, like high healthcare costs, and like the millions of people who are still uninsured. Division and fear are contributing to the epidemic of chronic stress that has gripped our nation, an epidemic that is fueling violence, drug use, and increased mortality. Now, what does it mean for you to be graduating and setting sail in a world like this? What it means is that there's an important responsibility that you have to take on. In addition to excelling in your future studies or the job that you take on next, the world also needs you to embrace your role as a moral leader in society. A moral leader in society. A moral leader who inspires us to reflect our values in our words and actions. A moral leader who leads by example. A moral leader who brings people together and enables them to see each other more clearly for who they are and to overcome their differences. Being a moral leader means standing up for truth, reason, and science. It means speaking out for the most vulnerable among us. It means not being afraid to write op-eds in your local paper or appear in local media when proposed policies would hurt your community. And it means holding elected leaders accountable for meeting the needs and upholding the values of our communities. That's what it means to be a moral leader. Now, I say this knowing that historically many of us have been reluctant to embrace such a role. We have shied away from wading into controversy or appearing to be political. We've been told that that might be too risky and might ruffle some feathers. But your obligation now as moral leaders is to stand up for the core values on which our society was built: equality, opportunity, and respect for all. Now, if that means engaging in controversy, then do it anyway. If that means risking being labeled as political, do it anyway. Principles are only worth having if you have the courage to act on them. You now have a powerful voice, and you must use that voice to improve people's lives. As you embark on this journey to be the moral leaders that our nation needs, there are 3 gifts that I wish for you. The first gift is clarity, the ability to see clearly whether we are holding true to our values. Moral clarity requires us to reflect honestly and deeply on our words, our actions, and how we treat each other. It requires us to ask ourselves that difficult question: are we measuring up to our highest standards? One conversation that will remain forever etched in my memory is one that I had with the father of a young boy who was tragically killed in the school shooting in Newtown in 2012. The boy's name was Daniel, and he had a special gift. Whenever there was someone who was left out or sad on the playground or in the cafeteria, Daniel would notice, and he would walk over to them and talk to them, or simply sit with them. Daniel was all of 6 years old. Yet he noticed when the rules of kindness and inclusion were not reflected in the world around him, and he chose to take action. We need more people with Daniel's clarity. As you look at your life and the world around you, ask yourself whether or not we are living up to our core values, because we cannot fix what we cannot see. The second gift I wish for you is courage. Courage is not the absence of doubt or uncertainty. This is very important, so let me say it again. Courage is not the absence of doubt or uncertainty. It is the ability to move forward even in the face of uncertainties and fear. Courage is what will allow you to speak the truth and to defend the truth, especially when it is difficult. When the Twin Towers fell on 9/11, on that fateful morning, 16 years ago, thousands of Manhattan residents fled south looking for an escape from the growing inferno behind them. But instead of relief, they were greeted by the unforgiving waters of the Hudson, which offered no path to safety. The panicked crowd continued to grow until the U.S. Coast Guard made a key decision. They issued a radio call to every civilian ship in the area, asking them to join on an unprecedented citizen rescue mission. The response was overwhelming. Within minutes, the Hudson was covered with scores of boats that were streaking toward the southern tip of Manhattan. They pierced through the dense cloud of dust, brought soot-covered people on board, offered them water, and ferried them to safety. In 9 hours, nearly 500,000 people were rescued. The 9/11 boat lift became the largest boat rescue in the history of the world. Now, the 9/11 boat lift was powered by ordinary people. They were never trained in emergency response. They would never have described themselves as heroes. And they had every reason to flee for safety themselves. But their courage is what allowed them to act. Vincent Ardolino, the captain of the Amberjack, said that his wife thought he was a maniac for wanting to go to Manhattan that morning. But But when he got the call, he knew that he had to go. Never go through life saying that you should have, he said later on. If you want to do something, you do it. To provide the moral leadership our country needs to close the gap between our highest values and our status quo requires courage. Courage to speak the truth, courage to model our values, and courage to demand change when it is needed. The third and final gift I wish for you is love. I have come to believe that there are two emotions that primarily drive all of our actions: love and fear. Love has its many manifestations, like generosity, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and joy. Fear has its manifestations too, as jealousy, anger, anxiety, cynicism, and insecurity. While fear can be motivating in the short term, it is exhausting in the long term. Operating out of fear for a prolonged period of time leaves individuals and societies hollowed out, depleted, and bitter. The challenge that we face today is that our world is locked in a struggle between love and fear. We see it in discussions around the dinner table and in our workplaces. We see it in our public discourse and in our politics. As moral leaders, there's a fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves. Will we be a nation that is governed by fear? Or will we be a nation that, when confronted with the choice, chooses love over fear? Now, there will always be some who choose to lead by instilling fear. This has been true throughout history. But fear is the crutch of cowards. Leading with fear as a weapon is a weak approach that scorches the spirit and leaves everyone less whole. True leadership means leading with that ultimate source of strength. It means leading with love. As society's newest leaders, the choice of how to lead starts with you. Choose to lead with love, always. Love is the world's oldest medicine. It is our greatest source of power. It is what we need to build a nation that is safe and strong for us and for our children. Graduates of the class of 2017, I stand here to tell you in no uncertain terms that America needs you. This is your time to step up and be the moral leaders that our country needs. Leaders that can inspire a nation to live by our highest ideals. Leaders who can remind us of who we are in those moments that we forget. As you go forward to live the rest of your lives, remember that the future is very difficult to predict. I remember on my graduation day thinking that I could map out the future and just follow my plan. But I was wrong. I could not have known which relationships would break my heart and which ones would help me heal. I could not have known that it would be a chance conversation between appetizers and the main course at a fellowship dinner that would lead me to the partner with whom I would build a technology company. I could not have known that it would be a petition for fixing our healthcare system that would lead me to the love of my life, my wife Alice. And I could never have known that the greatest moment of my tenure as Surgeon General would not be issuing the nation's first report on addiction or visiting my public health officers who were fighting Ebola in West Africa, as gratifying as those were. It would be the birth of my son, who has become my true north and my guide over the last 8 months. We can't plan the future out entirely. But what we can do is to be clear about the values that guide us. Never forget that the most important qualities that you need to change the world for the better are ones that you had before you arrived at the University of Hawaii. Your ability to care deeply about a fellow human being. Your ability to be authentic in word and actions. Your ability to lead with love. Because your lives will only get more full and fast-paced in the years ahead, there's one last thing that I wish for you, and that is moments of pause where you can stop, rest, and reflect. This might be a few minutes to write in a journal, to meditate, or to simply breathe. The world won't automatically give us these moments to pause. We have to create them. But those moments of calm are where we gather ourselves and set forth with a clear mind and a renewed heart. And if we ever forget the power of pausing, we need only take our hand and put it on our chest and remember the lesson of our heart. As some of you know, the heart operates in two phases. In systole, where it pumps blood to the vital organs, and diastole, where it relaxes. Now, most people assume that systole is where all the action is, and the more time in systole, the better. But diastole, that relaxation phase, is where the coronary blood vessels fill and supply life-sustaining oxygen to the heart muscle itself. Pausing, it turns out, is what sustains our heart. I'd like you to take 10 seconds with me and close your eyes. Think about the people whose kindness and love helped make today a reality. I'll keep track of the time. Class of 2017, the people you thought of are your anchors. They stand with you, and the world stands before you, brimming with possibility. I hope you always run toward that which you love. I wish you many moments of diastole. May you have lives full of joy, full of connection, and full of happiness. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy, for that truly inspirational and powerful remarks.